Good afternoon, everyone. We're about to kick off workshop number 3. So if you don't want to be in the room where we talk about recycling of textile waste, then you have to leave now, because this is what we're going to talk about in this room. I think the PEF will be in the next room, but stay here because I think we will be a bit more exciting. My name is Blees. I'm Policy Director of EuRIC, and I'm joined by Helene Smits. She's Chief Sustainability Officer of Recover. Before I will give all of you the floor to ask Helene all your questions, I will first introduce EuRIC a little bit, and also, of course, the concept of textile recycling, because I think we know all a lot about it, but maybe I can still give you some further ideas. EuRIC, that is similar to EuRATEX, but we are the European Recycling Industries Confederation. That means, like EuRATEX, our members are national recycling federations, and their members then are the recycling companies across Europe. Within Europe, our members recycle millions of tons of waste every year. When I say that, I think you all know that I'm not talking necessarily about textile recycling. In EuRIC, we also look at other streams. So for instance, metal recycling, paper recycling, plastics recycling, tire recycling, etc., etc. Those are waste streams that are recycled for, I don't know, hundreds of years, and it works really well. For instance, paper, if you see, I just recently bought actually tissues that have 100% recycled tissue in them. So I think that's really great. That's something that we are striving for the textile market as well. But right now, we know it's not the case yet. I think I'm going to repeat what you probably have heard or read already, because the Ellen MacArthur Foundation a few years ago published a report where we read only 1% of all textiles that are put on the market are actually closed-loop recycled at the moment. 1%. That means that very likely this dress is never going to become a new dress, because it's only 1%. If we look further in this report, it says 13% of all textiles placed on the market are open-loop recycled. So that means maybe my dress is going to become a wiper or insulation material or infill for a car. So that is possible. That already works fairly well in Europe and abroad. But, and maybe I should have mentioned this first, the report also states 12% of all the textiles are being reused. That, of course, if we look at the waste hierarchy, is higher up than recycling, and of course has a very good environmental impact, and we really support also reuse of textiles, be it within Europe or globally. But there is 73% that today goes into landfill or incineration, according to this Ellen MacArthur Foundation report. 73%. That's quite a lot. Of course, one of the reasons is that as of today, we do not have separate collection of textiles within the EU. That will change in 2025, so we know it's really around the corner. But today, of course, your textile, you can throw it in the normal waste bin. And the path for that is then, of course, incineration or landfill, if it's still possible in your country. That's a little bit the reason, but we do know there is hope. Textile recycling is emerging. That's why I'm also happy to have Helene with me, who will explain to us a little bit more in detail what can already be done. But I also recently read the Fashion for Good report, Sorting for Circularity Europe report, which was published just last month in September. And it says that 494,000 tons each year, which equals 74% of low-value post-consumer textile, is actually already readily available and suitable for recycling, closed-loop recycling, to close the loop, what we are always talking about, to actually make those textiles circular. So that's really promising and good news. This report, you can find it online if you want to read, I don't know, a few hundred pages, do it. But overall, this report is really, really promising, and it shows that mechanical and chemical textile recycling can actually recapture the value that we lose by incinerating and landfilling this textile waste today. So I'm really glad, Helene, that you are with me today and can tell us a little bit more what you can do at Recover and what are your technologies, if you can share with us.
Thank you, Julia. And I have, before we dive into the topic, and you might have all these questions that we will try to answer, I want to introduce Recover so that everybody understands who we are, what we do. Recover is a recycler of cotton waste. So we are a leading material science company and a global producer of low-impact, high-quality recycled cotton fiber and cotton fiber blends. We transform textile waste, which can be post-industrial, can be pre-consumer, post-consumer, into sustainable recycled fibers, closing the loop on fashion. So these fibers are really being created to make new yarns and make new products. And actually, this T-shirt that I'm wearing right now is also made from Recover recycled fiber. Our vision is really to achieve circular fashion for all. And we want to deliver innovative, cost-competitive, and that's an important one, cost-competitive, recycled fibers and circular solutions at scale. We want to move the needle, basically. And one other panel was saying before, to also really address the critical mass with our products. The journey for Recover started actually now already 75 years ago in Spain. It's originally a Spanish company where in 1947, the Ferré family started to recycle first jutes and things into fibers to create new yarns. And this was an innovation that they started that was born out of necessity because there were just not enough virgin materials out there at that time. Over the past decades, they've perfected this process and this technology, it's mechanical recycling, into what we can do today. It was 2006, really before the Recover products and the Recover brand name was born. And it took another almost 20 years to become this global brand that we are today. And I have a little video to give you a little bit of an idea of also why we do what we do. So to give you also a little bit of an idea of why we are a global company, so we have our headquarters and our first facility that's been running already for many, many years in Spain. But we now also have facilities running in Pakistan and Bangladesh, new facilities to be opened in Vietnam or other strategic locations like Central America, Turkey, South America, really trying to make this a globally accessible fiber that's also really connected to the manufacturing and the waste side. So be where the waste is and where the manufacturing is. Here you can see some of those pictures, and I think this is the last slide that I want to show before we dive into the topic, is really to stress that we are wanting to make this a mainstream. This is an example of one of our latest collaborations with Fruit of the Loom that is now introducing, Recover as basic T-shirts. And this is what we want to see. We want to be able to penetrate this market of basics that can be affordable for everybody. Because in this way, we can really make that impact that we want to make. Recover did not only supply the fibers for these products, but also we are really supporting on the storytelling. So we are even creating some of these visuals and creating the data, supplying the data that then the brand is using to tell the story to the consumer. I think I want to keep it short because we have a lot to discuss. So
that's true.
This at least gives you a little bit of an idea of who we are.
Thank you very much. I found it interesting that you say that you're wearing a T-shirt with recycled content in it. Anyone else in the audience who actually wears something where you know that a recycled fiber is in it? Raise your hand if you know that it's in your textile. very good over there. You get a thumbs up because I think there's not that. Perfect, wonderful. Because I didn't think actually anyone would raise their hand because I checked mine and there is really unfortunately nothing in it. It's a shame. But yeah, Helen, you also mentioned the in-feed that you're having, post-consumer textile. Do you actually have enough available? What about the sorting criteria that are out there? Is it actually matching what you need?
So I would like to first stress that still 95% of our business is based on recycling post-industrial waste. That's also, for example, the plant in Bangladesh, where you can't even import also post-consumer textiles. It's really based on recycling post-industrial waste. In Spain, we have been recycling denim already for quite some years, and now trying to expand that to other categories, because we really see, also with all the pending regulation, really Europe is where the post-consumer feedstock will be, and where we can scale that potentially. But as you were saying, and I have my cheat sheet, because I've also read the Sorting for Circularity report, of course, which I would really highly recommend everybody to read, because it's got some really good and completely new data. Indeed, so 74% of non-rewearables would be suitable for fiber-to-fiber recycling, of which 21% for mechanical recyclers like Recover, and 112,000 tons for cotton recyclers. So already now, there would be 112,000 tons of waste available to recycle for us. The McKinsey study, I don't know if people are aware of the McKinsey study that came out this summer, Scaling Textiles Recycling in Europe, says a similar thing. So between 70 and 75% of non-rewearable textiles, so in the textiles that are not suitable for reuse, because we have the waste hierarchy, are suitable for fiber-to-fiber recycling. And if we were to say, okay, in 2030, we will have collected more textiles due to the mandatory collection of textiles that is coming, we will have approximately, let's say, 8-9 million tons of textile waste, of which maybe 2 million will be suitable for fiber-to-fiber recycling. 2 million tons, that's a lot. So yes, there is enough. The problem is, it's not there in a way that we can use it yet. So that's where the sorting and pre-processing steps come in. Currently, well, I don't know, some of you may have been here for this previous session about EPR. The textile collection and recycling market now is not focused on fiber-to-fiber recycling. It's focused on reuse and providing material for open loop recycling. So it's a completely different way to sort textiles. For example, our feedstock specifications, for example, require that you can sort on composition and on color. That's very important for us. That's key. We also have other considerations, like, for example, there's certain materials that really give problems in recycling, like materials that have lurex yarns in them, warp knitted materials, and there's laminated materials. There's a few of those. And then there's the problem of contaminants. So we know that a lot of garments, I mean, this t-shirt does not, but buttons, zippers, big prints, embellishments, all kinds of things that we put on the textiles are problematic. They cannot be recycled, so they need to be removed first. So if you think about that, so you need to sort all of these textiles on composition, color, and remove all these items. Those processes do not yet exist at scale in Europe. So this needs to be developed in order for those 2 million tons of textiles to become available for recyclers like ourselves. And not only to do that in let's say the quality is good, but that it's also affordable. Because we also need to compete with virgin materials. I had the question about the business model and margins and cost and green premium. We try to be competitive with virgin cotton, which is hard because this is an industry that's a commodity industry. It's highly efficient, even subsidized, scaled, and we are not yet at that place, right? We are still in the process of scaling. So we don't have those efficiencies yet, and that's where, yeah, we have a challenge.
Yeah.
So
I think that's absolutely true. So there is enough in-feed, but we do need to find the right sorting specifications for every recycler that's out there so that they have their proper in-feed. theoretically there is enough already there. So, okay, let's work together with the sorters on that one to make sure there is enough. You also mentioned, of course, that Recover is mechanical recycling. There's, of course, as we know, also chemical recycling out there. What's your opinion? Do you think they will go hand in hand? Will one beat the other? What's your opinion on that one?
My personal opinion is that we really need each other even, so that it's partly complementary. And a few months ago, I even co-wrote an article together with Worn Again, CIRC, and RenewCell to speak about how there even can be a synergy between chemical and mechanical recycling. And if you want to read it, you can just access it online, so that's free for you to read. The thing is that we have pros and cons for both. So the big advantage of mechanical recycling is the low impact, because we are not adding any chemicals, we are not adding any water, we are not adding any, we just use energy. That's the big advantage. And that's in the current times also a cost advantage. The disadvantage is quality. So everybody knows with mechanical recycling, you do shorten the fiber a little bit. This is why we cannot produce 100% mechanically recycled products if you talk about using textile fabrics as feedstock, because there are mechanical recyclers that can do that, but they use different feedstock. So that's also really important to know. Whatever is possible in terms of quality and the recycled content in a final fabric depends on feedstock. If we use post-consumer as a feedstock, it's again more challenging, right? So we have to balance that. The other disadvantage of mechanical recycling is legacy chemicals, which is because what we put in comes out, right? We don't really chemically change, add anything or remove anything. So with, for example, chemical regulation becoming more strict step by step, it means, well, all the garments you are wearing now might not be compliant with the chemical regulation that's going to be set. And so when you then are done with it and you dispose of it and we sort it and we get it as feedstock, we create a fiber that might not be compliant with the current chemical regulations. And this is really something that is a big challenge and something that we need to address and see how we can harmonize the two, right? Because we want to be more safe, we want to have this no risks, but we also want to have a circular economy. So I really think there's a space for both. Even, I think the Sorting for Circularity report even says that we might not even have to compete on feedstock. There's really certain feedstock that can go to mechanical recyclers and certain feedstock that can go to chemical recyclers, because the main point of mechanical is cotton stays cotton. When you go to chemical recycling, or however you want to call it, cotton goes into, it becomes a man-made cellulosic fiber, which is great, it's also usable, but the world still wants cotton as well. So that's an important thing to realize.
Thank you. Since this is a workshop, I will ask one more question myself and then open it up to all of you, because I know you all have questions too, and we all want to know from Helene what's going on with regards to recycling. But you all also, of course, know that the textile strategy has been published in March. This is really a milestone for the industry, for the primary as well as the secondary industry. And within that, we also know eco-design will play a big role in the future, so that all of you will have to design the textiles at the beginning of the life in some way, so that they can either live longer or be recycled somehow easier, which of course doesn't always go hand in hand. But what's also very interesting in this eco-design for sustainable products regulation is recycled content. There it's mentioned that there is or could be a possibility to have mandatory recycled content targets. What's your view on that? I guess you will very much like that, of course. But do you have any idea what could be realistic? Because of course we're starting with 0 right now. Do you have any indication where this could go?
So yeah, exactly. This is something that we think is great and will also potentially be really a game changer for this industry, because it will it sends a signal to the market, the demand is there, it will change our business from a push market to, let's say, a pull for this material, not only from the brands, but also from the supply chain, which is something that I think when we were all mentioning stakeholders, the recyclers, the new circular value chain of textile sorters, collectors, recyclers is a very important new part of the value chain that is a stakeholder group we need to start involving. But also the manufacturers, because working with a virgin fiber might not be exactly the same as working with a recycled fiber, and we've seen that. We have a tech team that is dedicated just to help manufacturers process recycled fibers, because it's not just one-on-one replacement, and that's a technology transfer, and it's a mindset change that also needs to happen there. But we can do it. So considerations that we find are very important are, indeed, there needs to maybe be a different target for different categories, or for different fibers. It's easier maybe to put recycled polyester in a high content in a certain product than it is to put mechanically recycled cotton into a product. It would make things very complex, I do understand that, but I think putting a blanket target for every type of product and every type of fiber will be quite difficult. I have here also some samples which I can, this I would like to maybe, if you are interested, to feel and touch it, because these have been created using, I think, a variety of between 20 and 40% post-consumer recycled content, depending on the type of fabric that you're seeing. And of course, there's still challenges to overcome in terms of, mainly because the feedstock that we use for post-consumer is not 100% cotton, because that's not available in the market at scale. Even the Sorting for Circularity project says 42% of what they found is cotton or pure cotton, but they know that the near-infrared technology cannot yet detect elastane in a good way. So they think that's a huge overestimation, and that actually much of the pure cotton that we see in the post-consumer textiles has contamination of elastane or other small traces of other fibers. As you can imagine, what comes in goes out with mechanical recycling. So that comes in the fiber, it comes in the yarn, it comes in the fabric, and then when you dye it, potentially, then you can see. So there are still challenges to overcome and to see, okay, in which categories is this a problem? In which categories is this not a problem? How do we solve that with innovations? And again, the push to start doing that will only come when we have mandatory targets. Otherwise, it's so easy to say, oh, this is not the same as virgin, never mind. And this is a lot of times the response. We want exactly the same, and but we need to work together to get it there, to get it closer to what we expect from this material. And yeah, the whole value chain is needed for that.
That is indeed very wise words. Yeah, indeed. I actually checked the app before I went on stage and saw that maybe someone who sits here, posted a question in the app, which is, of course, also a way how you can do it. I don't have my phone with me right now, so next time, please raise your hand. But the question was if our panel can say something about the rehubs. So here I wonder, Helen, if you have one or two points on that one.
And I don't know if we can put on the presentation again, because the last slide also had some points from the rehubs, but as we
if not, we can invite everyone to come here.
So Rehub's initiative is something that's been launched and led by EuRIC for the past 2 years, with the aim to kind of find an answer to the question, what are we going to do with all the textile waste in Europe? Because we know that reuse markets and open loop recycling markets are already saturated, and it's only going to come more and more and more of probably low value textiles. So Recover, together with 20 other companies, has been part of the business council of Rehubs and trying to find answers, or let's say an approach or a roadmap on how we can address this. This is also something that's been presented this summer. So we're starting to communicate outward. And what we find, and it's also really actually great to see that this is a topic that's gaining a lot of interest in the market. So also the McKinsey study that came out in the summer is also given a lot of insight into what are the challenges and opportunities, and what is a potential roadmap to get to the state where, let's say, in 2030, we can actually recycle these textiles, make them into new products. I do think the timeline they have put there is very, very ambitious. I think we need to, in 10 years, or with under 10 years, need to build between 150 and 250 new facilities, either for sorting, pre-processing, or recycling. And we are in difficult times, so in this climate, let's say, not sure if we can move at that speed, but there is a clear roadmap. There are clear ideas on where does the sorting and pre-processing market need to go? What recycling capacity are we going to need? The only thing that is maybe still tricky also, and that's maybe a question here, if we're going to make new products out of that, where are we going to do that? Because if we want to keep the waste in Europe and we're all going to recycle it in Europe, do we have the supply chains to absorb all those recycled fibers here? Or we need to do that somewhere else? I don't have the answer, but and that's also part of ReHubs. We're still also figuring things out on the exact how we're going to do certain things, and to do that, collaboration and investment is very, very important. And so ReHubs will be, let's say, a new entity that has a collaboration and an investment platform. And as this new entity, ReHubs will also be a membership-based organization and is now welcoming other members to join, because we know with the 20 companies that we're not going to let's say, we're not going to win this war with these 20 companies. So if you're interested in joining or learning more, at least of what it means to join, I would definitely say reach out to somebody from EuRIC, Mauro in particular, because he's been mainly leading this effort so far. And here also I included, the one slide, the email address at the bottom. If you want more information or show your interest, you can also send an email to rehubs@euritex.eu. So hope more companies will join, because for sure the whole value chain needs to be represented, not only brands and retailers, which are very important, but it's in the end the supply chain that has to make those products. So
that's true. I like the spirit that the whole value chain only together can actually make a textile circular. So that's really good closing word for all my questions to you. But now I would really ask all of you, the audience, to ask your questions. Just raise your hand and I will give you the microphone. And if you take the floor, please just say who you are and who you represent. And then Helene will answer your question.
Hi, Ricardo Silva from Tintex here in Portugal. And thank you for the presentation. I think it was very interesting. And thank you for the work from Recover so far from the last years. I think it's a big change from the first years that we have seen in the industry. My question is, so two questions. First, you are recycling mechanically, means the sorting of by composition is also necessary to keep the composition on the label that according to the regulation. Many people have talked about that it may change in the future, that the EU laws could be different, the China laws could be different, that the mixed fibers concept could be adopted, and we would not need to specify compositions if it is a recycled material. Do you have any view on this? Any more information than I have, for example? This is the first question. Second, being Recover a purely mechanical recycling company, and we've seen other concepts going around with the chemical recycling, especially on the last 2 years, maybe booming. And on the closed loop versus open loop, clearly chemical recycling is closed loop, while mechanical recycling is not a closed loop, because it can't, because of the short fibers.
It depends on how you define closed loop, but yeah, okay.
Can we recycle a second time your t-shirt and have the same concept?
Yes.
Okay, that's a good thing. Do you think, or do you foresee this type of investments from Recover in the future on chemical recycling, or just purely mechanical recycling?
Ooh, okay, so two very different questions. On the labeling side, I'm actually not an expert there. I find that this is quite complicated regulation and also different in every country. So we do there sometimes rely on the brands to know the latest and greatest on that point. As far as I was aware, I thought that in Europe it's possible to put 5% other fibers. Yes, but with 5% other fibers, as a mechanical recycler, we can work because, for example, even if we have a 5% contamination in our feedstock, if we use even 50% content, then that's reduced to 2.5% in the final fabric. So we are working with trying to make sure that it's within that limit by when we use a certain recycled percentage in the new fabric. The other point about closed loop, so we say closed loop because we are going from a textile again to a textile, and indeed not 100%, although please be mindful that there are certain mechanical recyclers that can achieve that, only they use different feedstocks, so they don't recycle fabric, but they recycle yarn. So we can recycle, again, a recycled fabric. We do just every time need to blend in also some longer staple fibers or fibers with higher tenacity. It can be organic cotton, can be even polyester, recycled polyester. And I do want to note that I completely don't want to trash all the chemical recyclers, but the way that they stand right now is that even chemical recyclers at the moment are not all capable of recycling 100% cellulosic. So then they are actually not fully closed loop because they cannot recycle only their own outputs again. They will be. I've heard Spinova, they are working on that, and it should be possible in the future. But let's say now, for me, that's a question mark. If we're creating all this man-made cellulosics in the market, who's going to recycle those? But anyway, so.
Thank you for those interesting questions. Do we have more? Yes, the gentleman here in front.
Frank Martinelli, journalist from Spain. I have two questions. The first question is, which is the reaction of fashion brands when Recover contact them to try to establish a partnership, etc., to sell the fiber they produce? Which are the main reactions? And my second question, perhaps I should have a clear idea, but I do not have it. What is Recover selling? The recycled fiber, or final fabrics with a certain percentage of recycled fibers that can be already used by fashion producers?
Thank you. So going with the final question first. So we came from a company that was making the yarns, which was Ferre. At the moment, so maybe that's also where there can be some confusion. Now we really separated the two companies. So Recover is really a global producer of recycled fiber. So that's our product. But we work with supply chain to create in the best way possible the yarns and the fabrics, because there is not, let's say, spinning and processing recycled fibers is not exactly the same as doing that for virgin fiber. So we help the supply chain to do that, but our product is fiber.
Is the recycled fiber?
Yes, exactly. And what brands say, well, we have the luxury now sometimes that they call us instead of that we call them, which is already an improvement compared to, let's say, 10 years ago. It's still a tough industry because we are expected to compete in quality and price with virgin fiber, and that's not always possible. We are not only, let's say, how do you say that? We need to not only think about the fiber being competitive, but also the final product. So if some additional processing is needed, or if some additional waste is generated in the supply chain, then that also needs to be factored into the model. However, we are, I would say, successful in that, and we are working for, well, the Fruit of the Loom collaboration is an example. But Primark is our strategic long-term partner as well. And we all know that they have notoriously low price points. So we are able to create products that actually fit their business model. And so for us, that's always the proof to say we can be competitive and we can produce a recycled product for mass market.
But this morning I have noticed the question you have asked, but I have felt that this question meant that you had difficulties, that it's not easy to convince the fashion brands to use your product.
I actually didn't ask this question specifically for myself, but for, let's say, us as an industry, because, well, we are facing that problem also here and there, because let's say, we also have to deal with not only, let's say, there's not only volatility of virgin materials, but there's even volatility sometimes of waste materials that we need to deal with. So we are also struggling with that sometimes. We are able to get there, but it's my let's say my honest surprise in that I understand the multipliers. I know that that's what happens, but I just, in my mind, if I think about it, it does not make sense. If it's really 50 cents or less, how does that translate into 20 euros? How can we not find a better way to do that? Because if we say no to sustainable materials because of that, I mean, we are still a niche fiber. We are not yet at the level of having to be able to achieve the same efficiencies of scale that commodity fibers or virgin fibers have. So, and we will never get there if we are not able to kind of take the jump. And I'm saying we not only recover, but we more sustainable fibers. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Also great question, and also hopeful that also the fashion brands call you. So there's really a demand for circularity and for sustainability. That's very good news. You have your next question.
Hadi Karasu. I'm the board member of EuRIC and representing Turkish Clothing Manufacturers Association there. You set the target already. Like you said, from now on, industry is targeting to reach up to regaining 2.5 million tons of materials, which accounts 10% more or less of annual cotton production. Means we will altogether spend that much effort we have been discussing to regain 10% of annual cotton production, which is of course important. But what are your, I'm sure you might have made your plans, mid-term, long-term strategies as well. If you think about that roadmap and the milestones, what would be your expectation from the authorities like European Commission and the brands and the manufacturers? You might have made that kind of strategical analysis, I believe. The milestones, what are your expectations? What would be your expectations to achieve your goal, our goal together?
Broad question. I'm not sure if I will answer it the way that you intended your question, but I'll try. Achieving the 2.5 million tons within Europe, right? Because of course, hopefully, if we find a model to do it, we can do it worldwide and it can be bigger. But building capacity, one of the key milestones. The first big priority that we had set also within REUBS is sorting and pre-processing capacity. And there is a chicken and the egg story. We always say that is that, okay, how are we going to build capacity for sorting for recycling? Where's the recycling capacity? The recycling capacity is saying, well, I'm not going to build my plant if my feedstock is not there. So, okay, we need to come together and go increase that capacity step by step. The other big expectation that I have from the, let's say, the authorities is to harmonize rules and regulations, because there are some contradicting things also with potentially with the waste directive that is maybe not aligned with how are we going to build these global circular supply chains. This is also one thing that there's certain enablers that need to be in place to be able to achieve these targets. And if they are not put in place, I also don't have a glass bowl. I don't know what's going to happen. So those are a few points. I would say that the mandatory targets are very important because even the brands are calling us sometimes and they have, of course, Also, some of them show really great strides and voluntary commitments in adding recycled content, but it's still, whenever there is the question to say, is this or this, you know, it's not, if it becomes mandatory, we have a clearer roadmap. So for me, that's a big enabler, the mandatory recycled targets and enabling or harmonizing rules to achieve these circular supply chains. And that also has to do with trade. And that's not only Europe deciding that. I mean, that was my question. How are we going to make all these recycled fibers into products again? We have to look outside of Europe, I think, to be able to do that. But we cannot import recycled fiber into Turkey, or we cannot import it into China, or we cannot, or only with heavy duties. Or so how are we going to make these global supply chains work? Otherwise, we just have a big mountain of not garments, but recycled fiber, and sitting with the same problem.
Yeah, but the good news, of course, is that a regulatory framework is being set up currently in Europe. It will take, of course, years until it's there where we need it. And everything, you know, the EU is always very slow in doing things, but they started. So that's the very good news. As I mentioned before, we as EuRIC, as recycling industries representatives, we know how recycling should work for paper, metals, and we are very confident that it will work for textiles as well. But we need a regulatory framework. With the textile strategy, we do have, I would say, a good basis. And now let's see over the next few years what the Commission is doing with it. And then, of course, what every member state is doing with it. Because not everything that is regulated on a European level will automatically be incorporated one-to-one on a national level. So there are still lots of steps ahead, but we thankfully move into the right direction.
And I think one thing that I forgot, because we've not talked about the consumer at all, although I find it, because I'm also a consumer, I didn't originally come from the textiles industry. So when people are showing me fabrics, I like recycled fabrics, this is great. I sometimes go, let's say, or have a conversation with a brand or with the buyer or whoever, and they're like, oh no, and this is completely not good. And then, okay, there can be reasons, but sometimes there is like a little thing, and I would be, but if I'm buy a product, like as a consumer, I really would not see that. It really, like sometimes the standards that buyers put on thing is to cover the risk for themselves, right? Which I completely understand. But I sometimes wonder if you really ask a consumer, is that really something, is that a quality difference that they even see? I don't know. But the consumer is very important. They need to educate them, and they need to have, we were talking about that already before, transparent information. How that is relayed is a big challenge, because it's also, sustainability is very complex. So how do you tell that in a way that they can understand it without losing the information that you want to convey? And that's a challenge that we are facing in making the regulation. What kind of system are we using? What kind of information are we giving to be able to make those decisions? Hopefully it will provide an incentive, an additional incentive to us doing sustainable things, that in whichever way, in a material or in a processing or in which step of the process you are at, that it can also create a pull from the consumer side.
That's, yeah, very, very wise words indeed. If someone knows what actually sustainability means, please also let us know, because of course it's a very broad term, but we're moving towards the direction.
I always say the answer is it depends.
Yeah, it depends who you ask. Do we have other questions in the room? All the way in the back. Yeah, the microphone's coming. And then we move forward to you two. I make the microphone lady run a lot. Sorry for that.
The microphone.
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm from Zoritex. We are a startup innovating in technologies around the availability of sorted feedstocks for recycling. Thank you for answering my question earlier about rehubs. And I've got a question for you, Helene. Really interesting presentation, by the way. Thank you so much. A good discussion. How do you see the pricing dynamics of feedstocks unfolding, given the costs of sorting and pre-processing, especially as post-consumer stocks increase and pre-processing and sorting costs go up? I've heard quite a few stories of sorters being reluctant to sell to recyclers or closed loop recyclers because they're getting higher prices from wipers, which is downcycling. And there's a real tension between sorters and recyclers at the moment on those prices. So it would be great to get your insight.
Well, thank you for making a point that I myself forgot to make. This is the reality now. So I'm not saying that this is not going to change, but we are competing with the open loop recycling market or downcycling market, however you want to call it. And to serve those markets, the sorters don't need to do anything different. So that's one thing. So it's price, partly, but then there's also having to completely disrupt their process and their business model to serve a new market. And I think the sorting industry is not traditionally the most, let's say, innovative industry. There are a few exceptions, but that's also the process of either, and that's where we had the question also with rehubs, are these sorters, these new facilities, are those going to be facilities owned by the existing industry? Or are they going to be new players, like Siptex, for example, is a new player that steps into the recycling of non-rewearables specifically? Because this is a super fragmented market. There are a few big players, and the rest are super, super small. They don't have the capital. They don't have they cannot make that change. So there's probably going to be some kind of mix of the two, where the bigger players are able to develop those capacities themselves, and potentially having facilities that do only recycling for textiles, aggregating the volumes from multiple smaller players. But the reality now for us is what I said, the 112,000 tons of feedstock that should be there. Indeed, a big part of that is going to the wiper market now. And if we say we want the cotton, they say, well, okay, but if you take out all the cotton of those materials, we cannot sell the rest anymore. So then are you going to pay for my loss of income of not being able to sell those other textiles? And this is in this transformation, the situation that we're in, but this is a transformation. So they also see with these mandatory recycling targets, these markets will become saturated. They will not be able to, they see that it's going in a different way. But when the turning point is coming is, yeah, not yet exactly clear.
Thank you very much for the question. Then we move all the way to the front again.
My name is Mario. I am the president of the Portuguese Textile Association, and I'd like to congratulate you for your very nice presentation. And my question follows the same previous question, that is about cost. And first one is concerning how much it costs to make this mechanical process per kilo, and how do you compare your costs of your kilo of fibers that is recycled comparing to the virgin cotton? So
I'm not going to share exactly what our cost of our process is.
You are selling your products.
You
are selling. I can ask you because I'm not asking your profit.
No. But even our process. So and it's changing now, of course, because as I said, actually, up until 2 years ago, the market of textile waste, and mainly it's post-industrial that we use still, has been stable forever. And since a couple of years, it's not. So the volatility of that and energy prices and things like that, I mean, this is changing. So I cannot now say, based on the situation now, and also it's different for Spain as for Pakistan, as for Bangladesh. A little bit the challenges in Spain, the challenge of the energy crisis is a bigger challenge. But again, when it comes to feedstock, so what is the cost of the feedstock that we need to receive? If you look at the McKinsey report, there is a scenario where when we are in a scaled situation and we have automatization of sorting on composition and color and pre-processing, we definitely will be able to have a competitive market for post-consumer recycling. There is a situation or a scenario possible where the feedstock price can be acceptable to create recycled fibers that are competitive in the market. We are also, and we are hoping that in the transformation period, that we will have EPR. That's, I think the previous session was also alluding to the fact that EPR maybe should not be something that we would need forever. If we have set up these circular supply chains and these technologies and it's working at scale, perhaps then we will not need these fees anymore. But in the meantime, there is a need for investment. There is need for also potential subsidies of this process through EPR, where the sorters are supported for the non-rewearable fraction. Then for the foreseeable future, I think that's not a luxury, that's a necessity.
Thank you, Alberto Baccanelli, EuRIC president. I think the Fruit of the Loom project seems very interesting. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that from a technical point of view and from a marketing point of view and from a labeling point of view? Because, for example, which is the percentage of recycled fiber that gets into the yarn, which is the title of the yarn, and then more marketing and labeling. I think it's interesting.
Thank you. So that's definitely with with post-industrial recycled. So
Right.
let's be clear, it's not post-consumer. I believe this is 20% recycled content, which is what the absolute minimum that we require is 15% in the fabric. But ideally, we go 20 and above, also due to GRS certification, that we can at least achieve that content. We are always trying to balance, of course, cost, performance, recycled content, these kind of things. In terms of marketing, I think what we as Recover want to do is have the data to substantiate any kind of green claims that in the end the brand will do. So we perform our LCA on our product for Spain for now, and in the future also for the other facilities as they run, because the situation is not the same everywhere, to be able to provide third-party verified data that the brand can use to say, we're saving X, or whatever it is that we want to claim. We focus a lot on water, because water is really the biggest impact when it comes to comparing virgin cotton with recycled cotton. GHG impact, actual or global warming impact also is significant. I mean, you have approximately 10% reduction. However, if you only have 20% recycled content in a t-shirt, of course, it becomes much less. That's a little bit how we work. The labeling. In this case, because we really work with post-industrial, and that is always minimum 98% cotton, and it can be potentially traces of other fibers in there. But so labeling in that case is not any issue. Yeah.
GRS, they claim.
Well, if you want to claim GRS on the product itself, you need 50%, which we don't have. But they can claim GRS on, let's say, their website or things like that, but not really on the product. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one, maybe two more questions. Yes, please. And then you have the last word.
Who?
So first, yeah. Because I was reminded to end on time.
Oh yeah, I don't have a watch.
My name is Andy Christen. I'm from a totally from another sector. So I like to know, I hear 15% pre-consumer and so on. When I see a mud jeans, for example, I'm sure you know, has a much higher percentage of reused, recycled fiber. But when we start with eco-design, how would a denim jeans need to be designed that I can recycle it, let's say, 3 times with, let's say, 80% recycled fibers?
Well, mud jeans is a great example because the fibers are Recover fibers. Oh, you know? Okay. And we're great friends because I'm Dutch and they're Dutch, so it's good. And we've also taken their jeans back to recycle them again. So they have maximum, I think, 40%. And this is for a rigid style, because then you need to use recycled content in the yarn, both in warp and weft. And open end, I mean, when you can do ring spinning with recycled fibers, you can add stretch, which is also possible. I think we were used to be stuck a little bit in open end because we were also connected to Ferret, which is the expert on doing recycled yarns in open end. But we are now able to also do ring spinning or apply ring spinning on these technologies. And so you could also create maybe stretch jeans with a higher recycled content. The design for recyclability for jeans is actually quite a front runner, also due to the project of Ellen MacArthur. And when they came out originally with the guideline, it was, okay, monomaterial, obviously, which now is, I think, 98 cotton, max 2% elastane, avoiding unnecessary rivets, all these things, pocketing, well, all of these things. And when they were questioning me about this, I was like, and recycled content, right? And they're like, no, no. So initially there was no recycled content in it. And I keep saying, you can do eco-design, but the reason why you do eco-design is because you want it to be recyclable at the end of life. And if we were then to recycle everything at end of life, but nobody is using those fibers again in their fabric, we don't have a circular economy. We stop there. So eco-design also always should have recycled content included. Otherwise, you are... Yeah.
But do you have a showpiece how a denim, how a jeans should look like that you can recycle it 80% once, twice?
For the denims that we recycle now, we recycle denims that are not designed for cyclability. I mean, that's all the recycled content in jeans now has been produced with jeans. The main thing that I want to say is because I see that the market for jeans is moving away from, let's say, even 100% cotton fabrics with elastane, but using mainly polyester a lot more into the, I would say, just stop doing that. That's the main thing, stop doing that. To have a lower cost or to do, I don't know, whatever it is, to do that. If we have as much as possible cotton fabrics, if you have to change anything, then at least do a natural fiber. So add something like that, because in that sense, that will not, if we look at these fabrics, if you have to dye them again, if there's any polyester in the original, if we want to make a jeans fabric again from recycled jeans, and there is polyester in the jeans, you will not, indigo dyeing polyester, what will happen? You will get specks everywhere. So that's what we want to avoid, is to have polyester inside as much as possible. And this is, we are cleansing, or let's say that's, we're not there yet, of course, right? We have to deal with all the stuff that we are designing, and we're probably still going to design for the next 10 years that are not designed for recyclability.
And the support from the spinners and the twisters and the weavers is there, that the whole supply chain can work on this eco-design.
In denim, again, there's far ahead. And it's been already a 10-year process where these producers have been involved and engaged. And now, actually, if you go to a denim fair, it's the USP to promote this. And if you don't have it, you are behind. But that's not yet, and that's so great about this specific category or the session before. If you can focus only on mattresses, that's already really hard, but it's one category. And we're talking everything mixed, and then making again anything from a t-shirt to a chino to a sweater to a jacket, and that's the complexity is quite big. 20% is about the standard. If you go above, you are, yeah. Yeah.
I see there are way more questions. We have one more over there, then we have to unfortunately close the session because we ran out of time already. But the good news is Helen will be at the dinner tonight. So if you have questions, make sure to get a seat right next to her, and then you can ask her everything. Because right now, unfortunately, we really have to run through the last question. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm a spinner, and then I would be very happy to have some of your material to make some trials. But
Great.
That was not my question, and it's not really a question. I am as well a vice president of EuRIC, and I've heard that you have said that this summer there was a very interesting survey done by a very famous company. But and you say McKinsey a few times, but I want just to tell to all the others that that survey has been really done by EuRIC. It's really a EuRIC job through REUBs. And because I'm a member and vice president, I think it's very important to say what is EuRIC done for, because all that REUB project and all the survey has been really done by EuRIC. And you understand, maybe a lot of people from Portugal don't really know what EuRIC is always doing, and that's what the point I wanted to show and to share with you.
I think that was a good last word. Thank you for that. Thank you,
But not a
Helen.
question, no, just joking.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Oh, and I don't know, the textiles that are circulating, if you can...
Ah, yeah, we collect them
somehow
back. As we
try
do
to
it
get them back.
with the usable textiles, we collect them again. There's a collection box here.